Welcome back to MythVision. John F. White, Kraken Ford YouTube channel. Everyone go subscribe. He's a mythologist, studies ancient mythologies and stories. Welcome.
Thank you, Derek. It's good to be here.
You as well, John. We've had several discussions literally on dragons, the bovine bull. I get it right this time. The bull, you brought a 3,500 to 4,500, give or take, who knows, exact date, but it's clearly an old artifact, if you will, of a creature that was sacred to many, many people, Proto-Indo-Europeans especially, because that's what they did. They moved around with animals, and they kept them alive, clearly, and they were sacred. So we cover that. We covered hell. We cover dragons and serpents, and don't want to give too much away, but I want to talk about a question that came to my mind as you were describing way, way back. We talk about First Nation peoples here in the Americas. They did not have gods like we have, this idea of gods, right? They didn't think of the pantheon of the 12 from Greece, or they did not think about the one true God that monotheism ultimately ends up philosophically spelling out. So that it is a personal question, but it's also a question I kind of wanted to paint for you because it's my problem too.
Okay.
People ask me, Derek, do you believe in God? Or do you believe that there is a God? And I notice it's always in the singular. Do you believe that there is a God, okay, a creator? And I go, I don't know. I say, I really don't know if there's something out there that made all of this, and there's maybe something out there, but I say, ultimately, I don't, okay? I don't. And then I always turn it around to a category issue, where I say, you use the term like a creator, a demiurge, a god that made all this stuff. And I say, when I look at the history of anthropology, studying humans and how they've believed things, I think to myself, this is like a Johnny-come-late question. That they didn't have that question in mind. They didn't think like this. And that the concept of God or gods is a man-made construct, is what I tell them. That we have invented these categories to make sense of the world. So when you ask me, do I believe in a God? I go, well, I think humans have made that idea up to make sense of the world we live in. So no, technically by your question and what you're thinking, I don't. So John, I'm asking you, you better believe in the gods. No, I'm just kidding. Do you believe in God?
You raised some good points there, and it really does depend on what you mean by God. So there's sort of three answers to this. There's the no, it's all man-made. That's the easy one. There is the if gods are man-made, then yes, I am a god because I created my religious thoughts and beliefs. If I've created that religion, I must be the god of that religion. And because I'm made of stardust in the universe and part of the cosmos, I am part of the whole universe, and the universe is a part of me. So what better CV to have if I want to be a god than that? But I guess a third more serious point is actually what is a god? And because it's man-made, if you have to alter that, then there can't be gods, because otherwise you know what it is. But if you talk about who created the cosmos, if you want an answer to those questions, then no, it can't be a god because it needs a beginning. And this is a typical argument you often find, that if God has been around forever, we would have never got to this point for him to create the universe. If God hasn't been around forever, then he must have been created to have been there. So therefore God can't be the God. There must be another God. So yeah, it really depends. But if you talk about was the universe created, what put the energy there, then something must have happened to do that. And that is a really interesting question to answer that I don't think we will ever find the answer to, unless we're in a simulation.
Right.
And there's a really interesting argument to be had about simulations, that are we the sort of last running program in a current simulation. And so if you know about computers, there was a really interesting point I heard, which is that sometimes computers slow down when they're doing lots of busy calculations. Is gravity, in effect, the CPU of the universe, and gravity slows down time when lots of things have to happen? And does that then help us believe we are a simulation? And if we are a simulation, then it doesn't really matter what we think, it's just part of the simulation.
Right.
And you're not really here. So it's just pointless to worry about it. Do better things with your life than worry about if they're a God. Trust me, believing in a God will not make your life any better or worse. The decisions you make about it, though, might, but believing, no.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, again, what is a God, right, is a good question to ask historically. How did humans...
Absolutely.
What? Let me ask you this then, because you've really gone... I mean, you've covered a lot of different land, a lot of different culture, language, all of that. What were gods, or why did humans come to the category of gods? Because before that, you had sprites and spirits, or things that they believed had essence, if you will, to them, like some type of being, but they weren't called gods. They weren't understood the same way as gods. Or did they operate in place of where gods end up eventually come? Can you explain the origin of gods?
There's a few ways humans have tried to make sense of the world. One is through animism, which is that the world is alive and either everything has its own life and spirit, or we're all one life and spirit joined together. And there's shamanism that sort of works on that, extends it. But in terms of gods are, because gods are man-made, they're stories. And because they're stories, like all stories, they are affected by society and landscape. So when do gods appear? When do we start seeing humans carving figures of things we know are gods? And that is after we have sedentary behaviour. That is after we settle down and we surround ourselves not with nature but with other people. If you're surrounded yourself by other people and you have an administrative burden on your society, and you're blaming the tax man for this and the leader of that for that, and the other person for this and the other person for that, if you're looking for an answer to the universe, you're going to blame something that looks like a person.
Gotcha.
And that's where we get our gods. Then what happens is you have different gods for different types of things. You could probably have the tax person god or whatever in today's society, but you had gods that looked after the storms and the weather and the food and things like that. And we have to remember that back in time, everything was probably ritualized. So everything was done for a reason. We didn't have free time like we do today. So when you went hunting, you would ritualize that, or sing a song or tell a story. When you caught the animal, you would sing a song or tell a story. You would cook it, you would do the same. You eat it, you do the same. Everything was a ritual, and that's what that religious behaviour is about. You were praising the world and everything around you. But when all that starts disappearing, when you don't have to worry about a cycle of things and things coming back, and Christianity does have a part to play in that, because whilst there are some cyclical events annually, generally the Bible and Christianity is canonical, which is where the other stories tend to be repeated in earlier myths. So you sort of lose that sacredness you would get from a culture that would annually repeat things, not just Christmas and Easter, but I mean everything, every day, all the time.
Everything, yeah.
You
it's less, because there is that cyclical, and I think it still remains there, that there's still, this Sunday, there's this holiday, and they do a little bit of that, but like you said, it was almost...
compared to what it was,
yeah.
It's like we used to sacrifice humans, and then we sacrificed cows, and then horses, and then pigs and goats, and then we just made a model of a bovine and threw that in the river. Humans, capitalism has been around for a long time, and the value of things. That's all that happened. Our gods will no doubt change again when people talk about AI being the next religion. If there is a time where our brains are saved to a computer memory or whatever, and we live inside a chip, the gods of those times will look different to the gods we perceive today.
Yeah. So as far as gods are concerned and the definition of what gods are, I'm sure that's kind of a difficult thing to just pin down. But you mentioned there's a god, like Poseidon is a god of the ocean or water, right? And then you have Zeus, who's this like the supreme god, if you will, of the heavens, but also you could say thunder, lightning.
It's taken that aspect of the gods. You see that a lot.
Yeah.
That the chief god is also the storm god.
Right, and then various other gods represent various other natural phenomena. Even hunting with Artemis, for example, but even the deer, she kind of symbolizes with that particular animal. There's so much natural phenomena that gets identified anthropomorphically through a named entity, which is like a human-ish thing, but it's actually a god.
Think of them as anti-dragons. So we blame dragons for things that go wrong,
right?
But you had gods for things that go right,
right?
Or things that you benefit. That's all. They're just dragons, but in a human skin.
Well, that's why I bring this cow. Okay. I'm kidding. This bull up is because this would have been understood by some as a god. And in some, divine, right?
It would be a divine gift.
Okay,
yes.
so what about worshipping cows? Was there not?
In Hinduism, they don't worship the cow. The cow is sacred.
Okay.
They understand how perfect a gift it is from the gods.
Okay. So what about at a time when there's no gods that are entities like us, but much greater, much more powerful? Was there a time where humans did not have that, where maybe the ocean itself wasn't Poseidon, like we have this character in our minds with a three-pronged, holding his...
So the ocean was never Poseidon. I mean, you had the serpent of the ocean. The ocean represented a dragon, in a way.
Right.
But what you find in maybe other cultures, such as those that are more pastoral, are the gods tend to be more... personalities. So think of again the old Norse, the Vikings, that they had Thor, the weather or the sky god, the potentially including a storm god. He was actually the warrior god.
Right.
He was jovial and positive and looking to do the best. You worshipped him if you wanted to be jovial and happy and want to do your best and a strong fighter. If you wanted to father 50 children, Freya, that's your god. You wanted Freya. If you wanted to be wise, Odin. So gods took slightly different roles because we took it away from blaming the environment and just thought what will be. And so this is what I would like to be like. And the Old Norse were much like that. The fates were entwined in their life such that if you're not aware why Vikings were so good in battle is they really believed in the fates such that the day you're born they have decided the day you die. So you can go into battle as many times as you like, you are not going to die unless it's the day the fates decided. That's a mindset that many other armies didn't have.
Yeah.
And that's why they were so good. And that's why there's no point staying at home if there's a battle, because if you're going to die, you're going to die sitting at home. So you might as well die in the battlefield and get a chance to go to Valhalla, which is you do get an underworld in Old Norse mythology, but then they also have this split off as a reward system.
Yeah. Proto heaven,
sort of like
in a way.
proto heaven.
But for them, it's like
there's three lots. You had Freya's, I think it was Freya's, and then you had Odin's, and then you had the underworld proper.
Got it.
So you who knows where you'd end up, but that's why you wanted to do so well. And in fact, in their myth, if Odin saw someone who thought would be good in his heaven, his Valhalla, he would ensure they died. Wow. So he would get the body.
Okay. So then my final question on this God question is simply, do mythologists, scholars in the field, do they go back in time to a point where humans did not have gods?
Do they? Well, in what context?
So notice I'm using the term gods, okay? it clearly can be used to mean different things. Okay.
Okay. Let me twist. Okay.
Twist it. Yeah.
Right. So Neanderthals were around when Homo sapiens were around so they were around to about 30,000 years ago, give or take, and they've been around a lot longer than Homo sapiens. They could probably talk in a complex manner. They probably told stories. They created weapons. They could make clothes and dye clothes. They were pretty smart. They were as much humans as early humans. And early humans probably had religious thought in terms of death. So, are Neanderthals allowed to have gods? Did they have gods?
This is kind of questions I'm wanting to know.
And the audience should ask themselves, because if a Neanderthal can have a god and we consider them not human, then would your God allow that?
Right. But I guess I'm curious to know if there was some form of beliefs that were not gods.
Oh yes, you got the animistic and shamanistic stuff. So where they worship trees and the wind and the fire, and storms.
Yeah.
I mean, the power of the storm was immense. I mean, the oldest god's name I believe we have with some confidence has been discussed by Anatoly Lieberman, who talks about the Wothu, which is the noise of the wind through the trees, like the wild hunt.
We're going to have to talk
and the storms and the lightning, all that together.
Yeah.
That was a raging god that eventually would turn into Odin, to a part of Odin, 8,000 years later.
We need to talk about this in the next video. The oldest gods.
But that's how, spirits turned into a humanized being.
And that's what I was trying to get at. Ultimately, that was my question, because if you can go back in time and see humans did not have gods as we understand them,
definitely
as
didn't,
humanized-ish beings, but prior to that, they might have been spirits, ghosts, something else. Okay, the whole category of saying, do you believe in a god, is it's like, come on, it's all human.
You can only ask that in the last 10,000 years from the Near East, and in the last 5,000 in Europe. In the last 500 in the Americas.
Right.
So the fact that you can only ask that question at a certain date in time for people to understand it suggests that there is no God.
Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to subscribe. Kraken Ford YouTube channel, John F. White. Also, you can support us on Patreon if you love educational videos, you love learning this kind of stuff. Back up your educators, the people who are promoting education, by supporting them free through liking, sharing, commenting. There's various ways in which you can support what we do for free. And then there is also the financial ways. By supporting us on Patreon, you can private contact us and get early access to content. You can also help steer the direction of potential future episodes, and we hope that you'll help support what we're doing. So thanks so much, John.
Thank you, Derek. Excellent.